Welcome to the Love is the Cure Foundation Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Alfonso Vega. In today's episode, I want to share something that we learned through our journey with Inigo's cancer diagnosis and the importance of truly knowing your child. There's a story that stands out, and I think it's worth pondering, especially if you've ever considered gestures of solidarity for a loved one going through cancer treatments. We all know the act of shaving your head in support of cancer patients. It's often seen as a great way to show love and solidarity for someone enduring treatment. But for us, and more specifically for Inigo, something different happened when we considered this idea, and it completely changed our thinking on what it really means to show support. Today, I'll walk you through that story, what we learned, and how Inigo responded, and why it was so important. We hope this episode will give you some insight into how individual children may experience these kinds of gestures and the importance of knowing your child's needs during their journey. This is our story, and we share it in the hopes that someone else out there may gain strength or clarity from it. Let's get started. When Inigo was first diagnosed, we were sitting with him in the ICU waiting for a surgical suite to open up. To pass the time and ease his nerves, we were having conversations, some light, all serious. He was understandably anxious and had lots of questions, and we were trying our best to answer them while keeping a strong exterior. Inside, though, we were struggling, which I think is something most parents that have been through this can relate to experiencing during their own journey. Inigo had started to ask questions about the different treatments that he was going to undergo and their side effects. As we drifted between different topics, trying to pass each anxious minute, I said, "Inigo, when you start losing your hair from chemotherapy or radiation, I'll shave my head too." Lindy immediately chimed in, saying, "I'll do it too." At first, Inigo gave me a confused look, but when Lindy said she would also shave her head, his response was immediate. "Mom, why would you ever do that?" We laughed it off in the moment, but it became clear that Inigo wasn't the type of kid who was going to go along with gestures just because they were common in the cancer world or simply symbolic. Now, I want to be clear, we're not against anyone who has done this for their child or someone else undergoing treatment. It's a meaningful gesture for many families, and we absolutely respect that. But for us, and specifically for Inigo, it didn't feel right. Inigo, even at that young age, understood that his life was about to change drastically. He didn't know all the ways it would change, but he knew things were going to change. Looking back, we now realize he must have been feeling the effects of the tumor long before his diagnosis, even if we didn't see the signs right away. He was likely already aware that something was very wrong. Finally, being diagnosed was an answer for him as to why he had been feeling so crummy. But now this conversation about treatments and their side effects and losing his hair was just one more part of the many changes he knew were coming. When I first mentioned shaving my head, he seemed a bit puzzled. But since I already had short hair, it didn't bother him much. But when Lindy said she would do it, he immediately protested. He didn't want his mom to look any different. For him, seeing his mom, as she was, a familiar, comforting presence was important. He was about to lose so much, and he didn't want to lose the way his mom looked, too. This was another moment Inigo showed us just how deeply he wanted to hold on to some sense of normalcy. He was about to lose control over so many things in his life, and having his mom look like herself was something he wanted to keep. Inigo always had opinions about Lindy's hair. Since he was little, if he didn't like how she styled it, he would point to his head as if he was her personal hairdresser. Maybe he would have been one someday, who knows? But what we understood from that conversation is that for Inigo, there was no need to change something like shaving Lindy's head just because he was going to lose his hair. This realization was another factor that helped shape how we approached everything during Inigo's cancer journey. Every day we made sure to get up, open the blinds, let in the light, do our hair, wash our faces, and put on clean clothes. We needed to be present and stable. We needed to make a normal environment for Inigo. He deserved that. It wasn't fair to him, for us to let our grief or fear take over. And we felt that as parents, it was our job to be as solid as we could for him, even when we were grieving for him on the inside. Now, some might say that as parents, we need to take time to process our grief and emotions, and that can be true. But in our experience, we felt it was more important to focus on Inigo's well-being first. Our grief could wait. He only had this moment to have parents who were there for him in the most normal way possible. So going back to the head shaving, it was clear that Inigo needed his mom to look like his mom. He didn't want her to change something that didn't need changing. He didn't see shaving her head as an act of solidarity, because to him it wasn't the same thing. She wasn't losing her hair because of cancer. I'm so glad that we respected his feelings. The last day that Inigo was awake, one of the last things he did was reach up and grab my head and pull me closer so he could smell the hair product that I used. He always loved it. And he said, "You smell so good, Dad." That small moment of familiarity brought him comfort, and it's a memory that I always cherish. If I had shaved my head, that moment would have been lost. We wanted to share this story not to discourage anyone from showing support in their own way, but to offer a different perspective. For some kids, shaving your head might be exactly what they need and love. But for others like Inigo, it may not be the right choice. Every child is different, and it's important to consider how they feel about it before making such a gesture. Ask them what they want matters. What matters most is understanding what your child needs in their journey. For Inigo, it wasn't about us looking like him. It was about us looking like us, his parents, like home, like stability, like familiarity. And that's what we tried to give him every day. When Inigo did start losing his hair, he was in the middle of radiation therapy. At that time, he couldn't communicate verbally. Each morning, we would comb his hair and find thick brown locks left behind in the brush. I remember feeling deeply sad as I leaned over his bed, realizing what was happening. Lindy and I talked about it, and we thought it might be possible to communicate with Inigo about this change and try to get his feedback. We had the idea, for all the choices cancer had taken away from us, this was a moment where we could give Inigo back some control. One morning, we both leaned over his bed and asked if Inigo wanted to let his hair fall out or have it buzzed off. Using a series of eye blinks and slight head movements, Inigo was able to tell us that yes, he wanted his hair buzzed. That night, after Inigo and Lindy had fallen asleep, I left the hospital and went home and returned with clippers in hand. The next morning, we sat Innie up in a chair. I sat in front of him holding his hands, while Lindy carefully buzzed his hair, carefully navigating around shunts and freshly healed surgical sites. It was one of the few moments of triumph in those early days of Inigo's treatment. We could see a sense of calm in his eyes. Later, when Inigo did regain his ability to speak, he told us he was grateful that we had taken that action. He had seen how patchy his hair was becoming as it fell out, and even in the midst of his illness, Inigo still cared about how he looked. He said he felt he looked better with a buzz cut. Interestingly, the radiation doctors at the time advised against buzzing his hair. They believed he might lose a sense of identity. They said he was going to lose his hair anyway. But if we took it off, they felt that it could affect his confidence. But this is where knowing your child is so important. We knew, as the doctors were saying this to us, that they didn't truly understand Inigo's character. They didn't know him. They didn't realize how hard that Lindy and I were working to honor Inigo's wishes. Inigo had clearly communicated to us that buzzing his hair was what he wanted, and for us, that was what mattered. Knowing your child is crucial because, as this moment shows, when so much was out of his control, we were able to give Inigo some agency over something that mattered to him. It wasn't about what the doctors thought was right, it was about what Inigo wanted. And for him, having that small sense of control made a difference. This is our story, and we share it with the hope that it might offer strength or comfort to someone going through a similar journey. Because it's so personal to us, it doesn't require outside validation, of course. It's simply what we lived. But as I reflected on our experience, I grew curious about whether others had explored this topic as well. And shaving your head in solidarity is a powerful and common gesture in support of cancer patients. Yet our experience with it was deeply personal and different. I found a few articles that do offer various perspectives on this, which I will link below for anyone who might find them helpful. We know that every family's journey is unique, and we hope sharing ours encourages thoughtful reflection in your own. And that was it for today. Just a short thought and something to contemplate. Going forward, we will be pausing our episode uploads for the next few weeks. As a small foundation, we are tiny. Lindy and I are busy working on other essential tasks for the foundation. You may have noticed that Lindy hasn't been in the last few episodes. That's because she is hard at work on children's books, and illustrating them takes a long time and a lot of work. She initially agreed to join me for episodes where we spoke with our medical teams, since they've always known Lindy and I as a team. It made sense for both of us to participate in those conversations. As we move forward, you'll see less of her on camera, but that doesn't mean she's not involved. She's focusing heavily on the behind-the-scenes work for the foundation. Being in front of the camera was never her comfort zone, so I want to thank her for stepping out of it and joining me in these important conversations. It did take some convincing, but Lindy, you're awesome. We are excited to enter a new phase for our podcast. Our goal is to provide a platform for other families like ours to share their stories. We are working hard to bring on more parents to talk about their experiences, and we're also planning to feature cancer survivors to share their journeys as well. We believe it's so important to give people the space to share their stories, and we hope our podcast can be one of those platforms for them. From time to time, we will still bring on medical professionals to gather more insights and offer them a voice as well. To everyone who has watched and supported us so far, thank you for taking the time. Please feel free to share our episodes with anyone you might think might benefit from them. We've tried to make the episode descriptions clear so you can easily share based on what someone's needs might be. Thank you again for supporting what we do at the Love is the Cure Foundation. Go love on someone. We all need it. And remember, don't be afraid to ask for help. You are not alone in this journey.